This sitting is resumed. Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. First, let me thank all honourable members who spoke in this debate. Obviously, very wide and very emotive. And I too, like everybody else, could speak in a very emotional manner. But that will not be for today. I will leave that for another day. With respect to the Frank Rural House that the member for St. Michael West asked about, we will investigate it to see exactly what can be done with respect to the question that he asked about the Frank Rural House. Also questions were asked about the Wells program. I'm being told that the Wells program in the Pine is about 95% complete. I asked about it. They have a few more to do in the Pine. Yes, they have more in other constituencies. It's not been going at the pace that we would like, and I've instructed them how to make all the other wells safe first, and then come back and do all the remedial work. So we have that in hand. We appreciate that there are issues with the wells program, covering of the wells, but it's something that we are working on. Unoccupied buildings was also mentioned, and I have to inform the House that we have not only are well aware of all the unoccupied and buildings that need renovating, but in fact we have a significant program starting with the two buildings that were school meals buildings, actually on Country Road, and also the Barbados Water Authority building that we're working on to be able to bring those buildings into productive use and to reduce the amount of rents that the government of Barbados is paying, and instead bring those buildings into operative use. There are about 16 or 18, I believe, that the ministry is looking at to be able to bring those in productive use and reduce the rents that the government is paying for those buildings. Another thing that we're looking at very strongly is, and in fact in the manifesto, all of those derelict properties and vacant properties that we have throughout the urban corridor, and to be able to develop those for housing solutions or for commercial solutions after coming into an agreement with the owners. And we're developing a policy for that, and that will soon be before the Cabinet, and then by extension, if it has to, I imagine it have to come for legislation, then to the Parliament of Barbados. So we recognize, Mr. Speaker, that there are lots to be done. There's a significant number of people who want housing solutions of all types, be it land, be it already constructed houses, be it units, whatever it is. And we recognize it's a tremendous problem. Yes, there's a list of 46,000 people at the NHC, but that, even the veracity of that database is questionable, and we're going to start a program shortly to be able to reassess and see how many people are actually on the database, how many people are duplicates, have they changed their situation or status, and do they still want to proceed in finding a housing solution, have they found one, all those kinds of things we have to do. So first, let me thank the previous minister for all the good work that he did in putting us in good stead to be able to continue his good work and to be able to do better for the people of Barbados. Shelter and housing is a human right, and we have to try to do all that we can to be able to house every last person in this country who wants to get housing. And it's absolutely essential that we get on this as quickly as possible. And let me be very clear, Mr. Speaker. I have taken on this role and will give it all the passion that I gave to the previous ministry and more to this one, to be able to get as many people housed in this country as I possibly can. And with those few words, I'd ask that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed.
Order number 8, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, to move the passing of a resolution to approve in accordance with Section 5 of the Land Acquisition Act, Chapter 228, the compulsory acquisition by the Crown of the parcel of land, together with the building thereon, the property of Valerie Angelique Hamlin, situate at Belle Plain in the parish of St. Andrew in this island, for the public purposes of establishing a site of historic and heritage interest.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed.
9, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, to move the passing of a resolution to approve in accordance with Section 5 of the Land Acquisition Act, Chapter 228, the compulsory acquisition by the Crown of the parcels of land situate at Friendship in the parish of St. Michael in this island, for the public purpose, namely the development of a national botanical garden.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed.
And, sir, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, to move the passing of a resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Land Acquisition Act, Chapter 228, the compulsory acquisition by the Crown of the parcel of land situate at Lot 1, Bush Hall, Yard Gap, in the parish of St. Michael in this island, for the public purpose of youth participation in community improvement projects known as the Building Blocks Project.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed.
Order number 1, sir. In the name of the Honourable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, to move the second reading of the Police Amendment Bill 2019.
Honorable member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, I don't propose to detain the chamber long. I begin to feel that I begin every speech with that particular sentiment, sir. Before this Honourable House is a very short piece of legislation looking to amend the Police Act. And its genesis, sir, is the recognition that the Royal Barbados Police Force is quite simply short-staffed. The full complement of the force is just around 1,500 officers. And we are about 260 short of that complement. And in addition to that, sir, you have a number of officers who are on extended sick leave. I think that number is, I don't want to give an imprecise number to the chamber, but it is certainly over 30. And then you have a number of officers who are on sick leave from time to time. So as opposed to extended sick leave where you're off for an extended period of time, there are people who call in sick just about every day. Then of course there are the officers who are on holiday and on study leave and so on. And all of these things affect the ability of the force to provide the best possible coverage. Mr. Speaker, the Chamber would know that we've embarked on a number of initiatives that are intended, sir, to allow the force to become more efficient. One that immediately springs to mind, and one that I think we should be justly pleased and proud of, is the situation in relation to the police certificates of character. This chamber is peopled by MPs, all of whom I'm sure have had complaints from constituents who want and who have wanted to get police certificates of character. And they would tell you that they had to make a call and make an appointment. And that appointment was generally 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks down the line. And then they had to come in and fill out a form and they would take fingerprints, and then they had to wait another extended period of time before you get a certificate of character, sir. A rhetorical question, well worth asking, is how many members of this chamber have had discussions with constituents who say, I need a police certificate of character to carry in on Friday because somebody has a job for me. But the reality is they come to you because they would have had to wait 6 and 8 and 9 weeks before they could get the certificate of character. And of course, by that time, the job would probably already have gone. That certificate of character office was staffed by 3 police officers. We took a decision that we were going to have a completely automated process, a completely digital process, where you would apply for the certificate of character online, and fulfillment would also be online, sir. And we have been able to move from a process and processing time that would be 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks from start to finish to what sometimes, sir, is 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes from start to finish. So today, and we're tweaking it and making it better, actually. But as it stands today, sir, we are able to guarantee a police certificate of character, which you would apply for online, being sent to you by email within 24 hours of the payment. And in situations, sir, where individuals pay through the government portal, through Easy Pay, sometimes, in fact, I could be bold enough to say more often than not, that police certificate of character is emailed back to you within minutes of your application. Now, that is improving our service to the public, which is an absolute necessity for any police force. But of equal importance is the fact that it has freed up 6 police officers who no longer need to man that office and take fingerprints and do this and do that. It's freed up 6 police officers, sir, who can now go back into regular policing. I've, in a similar note, in order to improve efficiency of policing and a better deployment of our limited resources, I have approved and we are acting on a plan to deal with road traffic accidents differently. I had previously mentioned that plan being developed in this chamber. The actual plan has now been approved, and very soon we'll be having meetings with stakeholders again, so as to allow our force to work more efficiently. It's a must if you're short of numbers. We are also making greater use of technology by the use of cameras and so on, and all of those things, sir, allow us to multiply the force, so that in a situation where you have cameras in a particular area, let's take St. Lawrence Gap, for example, and they've been there for years now. That is what we call a force multiplier. It reduces the number of boots that you actually physically have to have on every corner of St. Lawrence Gap, and rely on technology to be able to be the eyes and ears of the police force. All of these are things that we have been doing and are working on. But one of the challenges one of the things that has always hamstrung us is an overly rigid view of what a policeman should be in terms of his physique and in terms of his age. And this amendment is to deal with that limited purpose. Currently, sir, a person must not be older than 30 years of age at the time of joining the force. So 30 years of age was the cutoff point. It is difficult to apply a strict measurement and say that a particular age is better or worse than another, but obviously it stands to reason that policing requires a certain robustness, a certain ability to handle the physical rigors of policing, long hours of duty. We've all seen police have to chase after people who've committed some offense or another, and therefore it's quite understandable that an age limit would be set, but that age limit has always been 30. And we've had serious discussions with the police force, and the police have said to us that they would like it raised to 35 because there have been too many physically fit young men and women, if you want to call them that, or let me rephrase it. There have been too many physically fit men and women who are perhaps more physically fit than those in their 20s, but they're disqualified from being even accepted into the force purely because they had hit that 30-year mark. And the police have said to us that by increasing it to 35, that they would have an opportunity to be able to recruit more people. And more mature people as well, certainly. And the other thing, the other feature that this amendment is we're not adding now, we're taking out. Currently, the height and chest sizes are set by the Governor General. In fact, sir, the Act as it stands says that you must be, and I'm now quoting, of the required height and chest measurements according to a standard to be fixed from time to time by the Governor General. So unless you met certain physical attributes now, a particular chest size and a particular height, then you could not be considered and accepted into the force. My research, and I believe I've shared it with this chamber before, my research showed me that the shortest police officer in the world is a police woman in England who is barely past 4 feet tall. And the tallest police officer anywhere in the world is over 7 feet tall. And we keep saying to I certainly keep saying to our young men and women who are in the university and coming out of the university that we need to develop a regime that, in addition to attracting people who are well proportioned physically, we also need to be able to attract a computer genius who might be 4 foot tall and real tiny. But those are the kinds of attributes that we are now requiring of our police officers, that they be trained in so many other areas. And why would we reject a person who has the skill set that we require, but is shorter than the age than the height that you set, or older than the age limit? I'd like to see a police force, sir, if we were able to find an absolute wizard at being able to root out some of these people who constantly send them about nuisance WhatsApp messages and fake news and all those kinds of things. If we could find somebody who is skilled at that, would we want to tell them, I'm sorry, but you can't become a police officer because you're not tall enough, or because you're a little too bony, or because you're top 36 now? So what we've determined is that we will remove the requirement for a person joining the force to be of a particular size and girth and robustness, because we recognize, sir, that there are other attributes that would make a person a good prospect to join the police force. Sir, already the force is using already the force is trying to recruit additional people. I believe just about now a new cohort of special constables is to start their training. And sir, I will not go into how it is intended that they should be mobilized, but the fact is that there are some policing duties that do not, or put another way, there are some policing duties that a person who does not have the full training of a police officer can do. So right now, I don't think any of you would be able to recognize who is a special constable from who is a police constable, but they're still doing policing duties. They're still doing policing duties, and there are individuals, Mr. Speaker, who can join the force as a special constable, but may not have the academic qualifications to actually be recruited as a police officer. And there are transition arrangements for them to move up and so on. But the point is that we're doing a number of things within the force to try to free up our police officers. So we are recruiting special constables so as to be able to free up some of our better trained police officers to do more dedicated work. I'll end the short presentation not just by asking the Chamber to fully support this measure, but also by saying that we want people to come forward and join the force. Members of the public may have noticed a set of ads on social media trying to encourage young men and women to still see policing as a good career. It is a difficult job. Many of us in here would not even begin to think about it. But it is a job, sir, that I believe brings with it a fair amount of satisfaction. And in today's world, certainly prospects for training and other avenues. In my discussions with the Commissioner of Police, we're talking about recruiting other specially trained individuals. Because as we look more, and the time will come when we will be talking more about financial crimes, we have to have in our police force people who are financial analysts, people who are trained accountants and trained lawyers. I mean, it's not that we don't have them, but we certainly need more. So in order to stamp out corruption, we have to be able to speedily investigate cases of financial crime and investigate them with thoroughness and in a way that we can be satisfied that the evidence will stick. But as financial crimes become more and more complex, we need, of course, to have officers who have a far greater breadth of training than we currently have. And in addition to that, sir, while it is important that we expose our existing officers to all the training that is possible, the time has come perhaps when we need to start going out there and finding accountants and saying to an accountant, would you consider being a police officer? You know, there are people who work every day, politicians perhaps, and they're not doing it for the money. They're not doing it for the money. They're doing it for satisfaction. They're doing it for a feeling of doing something that really has an opportunity to impact our communities and the world around us. And so, sir, I ask the Chamber to support these measures, but in the context of a force that is modern, in the context of a force that this administration has made sure we equip them to the finest standards available, in the context too of a force that is adjusting to meet the changes of a more modern world. Long gone are the days when our young men and women wanted badly to be police officers. That was the time when people felt that the careers that were within reach of the average individual that would take you somewhere would be a policeman or a teacher or a priest. Those days are gone. People don't view it in those terms anymore. But it is our job in this chamber and in the executive to try to ensure that policing remains a good career option for individuals, and I believe that it is. And certainly as I interact with many of the police officers, yes, it's tough. It is tough when in the face of an increasing use of weapons, of firearms, you have to tell police officers, well, you have to give up an off day and work 6 days of 7. Yes, it is. But I have not met any of them who've been complaining, sir. They've not been complaining. I know it's hard, and we thank them for their sacrifice and for their service. But it is precisely because of the fact that they're serving their communities, their brothers and sisters, the people that they know, to help to make us a stronger, safer country, that I believe that policing will always be an attractive option for those who are so inclined. I ask that this chamber support this measure, and I ask that this chamber and all of Barbados continues to support the Royal Barbados Police Force as they grapple, and I will say as they grapple successfully too. You know, people see the homicides, but they don't notice the success rate. We don't publish the gun seizures. Occasionally you will hear about a gun seizure, you will see it in the press. Occasionally you will see a drug haul in the press. But there's a lot of that stuff going on behind the scenes as a result of dogged determination, hard work, intelligence gathering, and the guys, the men and women of the force are getting it done. They're getting it done. But I guess human nature is that you only see one side of things. You just see the perpetration of the wrong without noticing sometimes the speed with which the perpetrator is being apprehended by the Royal Barbados Police Force. COVID has been a challenge for them, as for all of us, but they have risen to that particular challenge, and I am confident, sir, that they will continue to rise to all the other challenges that beset us as a society and that present itself to the force. And with those words, I commend this short bill and express my gratitude to you, sir, for allowing me this time.
I remember we have to move that the bill be read a second time.
Beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Honourable Member for St. Michael West.
Thank you, sir. Just briefly to add some comments to those already offered in the chamber. I believe that there's a sense being derived in Barbados by many. Certainly I'm coming to that point where it would seem that the government is a bit out of touch with the feature and specter of crime, especially violent crime in Barbados. I heard the Honourable Member for St. Joseph, the Honourable Attorney General, he just alluded to this again. I heard him in recent days speaking with reference to the fact that we are experiencing a reduction in crime in Barbados. He was echoing the words of the Commissioner, and I think reference was being made perhaps broadly to statistics. Statistically, we may in fact in Barbados be seeing a reduction in certain criminal acts. We may, in fact, be seeing decreasing level of success on the part of the force through dint of effort in responding to and solving certain criminal activity. But I do not know that one in Barbados is possessed of a sense that crime is not an increasing problem in Barbados, especially violent crime. If you satisfy yourself to look at it from the perspective of statistics and point to a decrease in that, resolution of that, fine. But I don't think you will convince many Barbadians that we do not have a worsening problem with crime, especially violent crime in Barbados. And I think the government continues to project that. They will represent themselves to the public of Barbados as being out of touch with reality. I heard the Honourable Prime Minister a few months ago say to the country that the measures put into effect by this administration in recent months had already begun to take positive effect and that the difference could be realized. I warned them that it was a bit too early to say that because there was an apparent lull. Well, we're way past now that period of lull. And we are on track with reference especially to gun-related crimes, violent crimes of that nature, of exceeding what transpired, the reality of last year. Every night, I don't live in the heights and terraces, so I don't know what happens up there. But every night where I live, Mr. Speaker, I hear gunshots coming from south and southeast of me, and coming from east of me. Every night. I don't think that that is an exaggeration. I live in an urban community. I suspect that that kind of reality is experienced in several urban districts. I have a sense that it is also the reality in some rural areas, which perhaps was not once the case. I think it is a little bit of an insult to the intelligence of Barbadians to try to give them a sense of comfort and reassurance by saying to them that we have a diminishing problem with crime because the statistics with reference to some aspects of crime are showing a reduction. It is especially the violent crime. It is especially the gun-related crimes that Barbadians are quite concerned about. We've just gone through, we're still in a period of COVID and the restrictions of movement gendered by that. And one may assume that some who would otherwise perhaps have been involved in criminal activity found it a little bit difficult so to do. Because to be moving around at certain times in certain places, you ought to be able to explain yourself. And I think the court records would show that some have found themselves up dodds because they were found in the wrong place at the wrong time and could not give a proper and plausible explanation. So to try to give Barbadians a sense that crime is on the decrease and it is not the concern that the reality suggests it is, I think is a bit insulting to the intelligence. Some months ago I said in this honorable chamber, I think it was, that we have got to be careful in Barbados about a drift towards criminal anarchy. That's criticized and mocked, because criminal anarchy has a different interpretation in North American jurisdictions. But I think we're in reality faced with that specter of criminal anarchy in Barbados. a circumstance, a context in which criminals have no regard or respect for the law, no fear of the law. No matter how well armed the law might be, sometimes no matter how immediately present the law may appear to be. We had a recent experience of shooting resulted in death and the spread of pervasive fear in an urban district in St. Michael West. Not the first time. Not the first time. Mr. Speaker, you know these areas. You are well in touch with and very familiar with urban Barbados. And sometimes when people find themselves afoul of the law, they turn up in your presence, hoping for your mercies, your help. This most recent of incidents took place in earshot of the Black Rock Police Station. A matter of seconds movement away from the police station. You can't tell Barbadians to feel comforted or reassured when these things are a daily occurrence in their communities and their neighborhoods. When you are in the four walls of your house and bullets are coming through your bedroom window, you cannot convince Barbadians that there's any measure of comfort to be found in that type of reality. So it doesn't matter what statistics you bring. We're not talking about petty crime here. We're talking about serious crime that poses a danger to life and limb of innocent citizens and visitors. Now, that is where we are. When you can do it seconds movement away from a police station, you're prepared to do it against the police. I have said long ago in this honorable chamber, in the other place, that if we don't get a handle on that particular aspect of crime in Barbados, it threatens all that we have gained in terms of our development. It threatens all that potentially we can achieve in terms of our development. And when the chorus is sounded that they're killing each other, so don't bother about it, that is not an advisable position. Because when they're tired training the guns on each other, they will train them on law enforcement in Barbados. And when that is not sufficient, they will train them on the political authorities in Barbados. Mark my words. That day is coming if we don't get a handle on this. So we can sit on our cushions of portfolio comfort and say to Barbados, we got this. We got this. But if we don't get a handle on that, it's going to destroy this place. And I do not think, though we applaud the successes of the police to the extent that they're recorded, don't think that we should be telling Barbadians we don't want them to feel a sense of desperation and fear, but we should not also lull them into a false sense of comfort when the reality suggests otherwise. I believe, Mr. Speaker, we need to try to see how we can enhance and improve the appeal of the job which we call a police officer. When we are faced with situations in other areas of endeavor where certain aspects of work, certain types of work don't seem to attract the numbers that we would hope, one of the things we look at is the appeal of the job, the attractiveness of the job, and how we can enhance the position such that people will more rapidly and in greater numbers gravitate towards it. I have called for and will continue to say that we need to pay our police officers, especially those below the level of sergeant, better. I will continue to say that. And that is not the only way you can enhance the appeal of a particular position. There are other ways, but it has to be studied. The job of a police officer in these days is a difficult and dangerous one. Therefore, the circumstances in which we ask these men and women to function must be looked at. And it is not only providing them with better grades of arms, it is other than that as well. This particular measure speaks to qualifications, and you talk about 3 CXC or other forms of certification. I think we need to be careful with respect to the subject matter that constitutes the qualifying criteria for getting into the police force. 3 CXC could mean anything. It probably should include English, the ability to read.
Mr. Speaker, I don't want the member to go down, well, not the wrong road. He can go down any road he wishes. Let me just explain that the current practice in relation to amending legislation, instead of saying clause 1, subclause 2(1)(a), is amended by changing the number 30 to 35. And then you go on to say that clause 24 to B is now deleted. The current practice, sir, is to make the change and to replace the section in its entirety, so that what the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is referring to here has been in this bill since 2007, at which time, I remind him, he was a sitting member of Parliament for the then government, the Barbados Labour Party. So what he's reading about CXCs has been the law of Barbados, enacted by a parliament that he was a part of, and an executive that he was a part of since 2007. So this is not new. If he wishes to say that they can change the qualifications, that's entirely up to him. But I could not sit here and agree that he should convey to the public that this is something that we are now putting in. So it's been here since 2007. It is only how we amend legislation that causes us to repeat it in this way.
Continue, Honourable.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the intervention. I don't know how you draft a legislation or amendments to legislation. I'm not suggesting that is new. I'm saying it's a part of the legislative architecture. And I'm saying further to that, when we talk about 3 certificates, CXC or whatever, we have to be careful as to what specifically we're addressing as subject matter. I do not know necessarily that you want to include in those 3 CXC certain areas that are studied in the education system of Barbados. All I'm saying is, if you're going to be demanding 3 or 4, I think that it should speak to certain areas of study which constitute immediate relevance to police work, and not just 3. That's all I'm saying. I'm not necessarily saying that it is new. So I think I'm making myself a little clearer second time around. Now, I've said before, and it obtains in other places, that there has been now for years a move towards civilianization of police forces, and that you recruit people to enhance your force complement, to increase your force complement, without necessarily making reference to the recruitment of persons as police officers. But there's civilians that can do various aspects of work related to what police operations require. So if you want me to do a certain aspect of clerical function, perhaps, Why do I necessarily have to go up Christchurch and spend 6 months building muscles and necessarily being trained in certain procedures? All I'm saying is we need to civilianize certain aspects of police operations in Barbados. Why is it? Police department, police force is still expected to respond to vehicular accidents, duty reports. These, to me, are functions that can be passed to civilian entities, properly regulated, after discussion with insurance companies and stuff like that. I'm just trying to be illustrative here, Mr. Speaker. But if you want to enhance your numbers, part of the way to do that, and it was alluded to by the Honourable member who last spoke himself, is that you remove certain responsibilities from the immediate purview of what you call your police force, and supplement those aspects of the task with civilian entities, civilian agencies, and civilian effort. I'm glad that we're past that stage where perhaps the first recourse to get further staff complements, to supplement your numbers, is pursued by reference to imported elements. We have had a number of people who've left Barbados and gone to serve overseas in police forces. There are some entities in the Caribbean that import a lot of police presence, force complement from outside. I'm glad that in Barbados we are not looking to go in that direction. And I hope the situation does not become so desperate and the shortfall so acute that we feel a sense of compulsion to look to get policemen to come outside. Now, to me, that introduces all kinds of dynamics and elements for which we are not necessarily prepared in this day and in this age. When we wanted agricultural labor, we got that. When we wanted people to help in the sugarcane fields, when we had sugarcane fields, we got that. But I'm glad that as a first step, we're not looking to get sorry? We got a motion. We're hoping that you would revive that aspect of industry in Barbados. Not necessarily in the same way, but we don't have fields now. So that we don't have to import people from St. Vincent to come to cut canes here and stuff like that. And we don't want to go down that road with reference to the police force, either at the senior levels, as is the case in some jurisdictions, or in the lower ranks of the police force. Mr. Speaker, there are small misdemeanor offenses that sometimes prevent people from gaining certain types of employment in Barbados. And perhaps the time has come, if we're not there yet, where we start to look at that. People have all kinds of youthful indiscretions, which with a further few years of maturity recede into their background and never trouble them or bother anybody else again. And we have got to, if we're faced with this as an obstacle, address a situation where small minor indiscretions constitute an everlasting prohibition to people from finding certain types of employment in Barbados. Last thing I will say is this, Mr. Speaker. We need to lengthen. The Honourable Attorney General says that there was a time when the qualifying criteria included a reference to physique, height, chest size, muscles. My father was a policeman. Very much underpaid. They still are underpaid, as years ago. And chest size and muscular physique and height. And I think I heard him suggest that those things should not necessarily constitute significantly so the basis upon which people are allowed entry into the force. Agree with that. But I also think, Mr. Speaker, that in Barbados, the arms of the law need to be lengthened, that they may be able to reach the untouchables and the unreachables in Barbados. Until we come to that place where the arms of the law are made long enough to reach certain elements in Barbados, we're going to have problems persisting. The muscles of the law need to be strengthened so that when the hands reach the untouchables, those untouchables can be apprehended, arrested, and detained. You work in the legal and judicial system, Mr. Speaker, and those with whose fortunes you are charged sometimes before the court are in multiple cases persons from the certain sections of society. They wear a certain hue and image, they operate at a certain level, and they identify with certain classes, certain races. And Mr. Speaker, there's nobody who can tell me and convince me that some of these elements are not at the root of the problems we have with some of the violent crime in Barbados. And though I believe that physical attributes in the real sense should not be a criteria that precludes people from access in reasonable situations, certainly in the figurative sense, I think those arms should be a little longer and those muscles a little bit stronger, so that people don't escape the grasp of justice and they pay for the crimes that they perpetrate or facilitate others in perpetrating. That is the reality of Barbados today, Mr. Speaker. So certain elements are made to appear in handcuffs, and others are not. And certain elements are brought through the front door, and others through the back. Certain elements make the front pages, and some are not featured in any pages at all. And certain elements are informed when the short arms of the law and the not so strong muscles of the law are on their way, and they're prepared against intrusion from the force of law. These are things we need to deal with, rather than tell people statistics show crime is coming down. Statistics show that Barbados is becoming a better place when it comes to the phenomenon we call crime. I think if we do that, we delude ourselves, and unintentionally, we deceive the population. I thank you, sir.
Honourable Member St. Joseph. Honourable Member, can you please turn off your mic?
Sorry.
Honourable Member St. Joseph.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has ranged far and wide, and I believe that on matters relating to crime, there will be no space between him and any member on this side. Certainly, in my presentation to this chamber today, I did not say anything about statistics coming down. I believe I know where he got that impression from. But let me reassure both him and all other persons who are thinking like him, that this administration has never, nor will it ever, seek to find succor in the fact that in some areas statistics show that crime is down. In my recent comments to the press, I said to them unequivocally that what keeps Barbadians up at night and what keeps me and all of us up at night is the increasing use of firearms generally and in relation to the perpetration of homicides. I don't think that the Barbados today in relation to burglaries and a whole set of other things is viewed through the same lens as the Barbados today, where there are shootings on a regular basis. The news this morning, I think, is that 3 or 4 individuals were shot in Eden Lodge. We have to thank God that none of the injuries are life-threatening. We've never shied away from the haunting nature, sir, of firearm crimes in our country. We've faced it up front. We've said that it is the greatest threat to this country's stability. We've said that it is the threat to this country's future. We've said that we have spent a lot of effort in trying to rebuild the Barbadian economy, and some vagabonds with guns are putting all of that hard work at risk. So let there be no doubt, this Barbados Labour Party administration is not changing its tune in relation to crime or what crime looks like. As Attorney General, I take no satisfaction in knowing that one side of crime is down statistically while people are terrorized by gunmen and hoodlums in their homes. I take no satisfaction in it. I don't think anybody on this side takes any satisfaction. I don't think the opposition takes any satisfaction in it. And sir, when we were in opposition and the last administration tried to hide behind some areas coming down while people were running down individuals on a Kadooment day down Spring Garden, shooting at them and killing one of them, we took the position that numbers, statistics are not what we need to be dealing with. That has not changed. That has not changed, sir. So if the leader of the opposition somehow or another feels that this Barbados Labour Party, now that we're in government, that we're looking to hide behind some statistics that may show that burglary is down and that this is down, we're not looking to hide behind that, sir. In fact, we take no pleasure in it. We take no encouragement from it, because we recognize that gun crime and homicide, sir, are the cancer that is eating away at this society. And we are going to do all in our power to rescue Barbados from that kind of future. I hope that the leader of the opposition will join us in it. I hope that when we call for citizens to come out and say what they saw, that the leader of the opposition will stand alongside me and say, I agree. I hope that if the leader of the opposition ever happens to come to any knowledge about any criminal offense, that he'll be the first man at Central Police Station to tell. Because, sir, this is a solemn obligation that each of us owe to this country. And I know where we stand. And I only wish that the leader of the opposition had been good enough to tell us where he stands, sir. Mr. Speaker, he ended his speech with something about the arms of the law being lengthened. I will replay on social media because he didn't understand the first time he said it. So maybe when I am able to give it considered study, I'll be able to pick sense, as your people say, from nonsense. Mr. Speaker, if there's one thing that this administration has tried to do is to make sure that people are treated equally. There's a maxim of law called equality before the law, and while that generally refers to equality before the law courts, we believe, sir, that every citizen in Barbados is to be treated equally, no matter the circumstances, whether it has to do with people applying for welfare or somebody being dealt with in the court system. That is what we stand for. Mr. Speaker, I don't think I need to go any further. I thank all honourable members for their support, for their acquiescence by silence. And I pledge, sir, to continue with the work that we're doing and to continue to support the Royal Barbados Police Force in its efforts. I've already moved, sir, that this bill be read a second time, and I'd be grateful if you would put the motion, sir.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye.
I
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
beg to move, sir, that you do now leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
We got to amend the year.
Far enough. This House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 1 be amended to change the year 2019 to 2020.
Question is that clause 1 be amended as mentioned. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
Question is that clause 2 stand for. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Beg to move, Madam Chair, that you do not report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Question is that I do not now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill in committee. You want to be read a third time? The question is that this bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Police Amendment Act 2020.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
We're going to call it. We're going to return to call it back. You're going to do what?
Order number 6, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, to move the second reading of the Resolution Life Assurance Company Limited Transfer of Bonds Bill 2020.
Honourable Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The bill to which I will address, sir, is a pretty straightforward piece of legislation. As you would know, sir, the government of Barbados, upon assuming office, sir, would have inherited a situation where the last administration, which was really, sir, one of the last set of irresponsible financial management that it undertook in the last quarter of 2017, sir, where the previous administration, sir, would have issued some $600 million or so in debt, sir, and took on the liability associated with the failed company, Clico Life International, sir, and accepted, sir, in exchange for $600 million in debt, sir, on the backs of taxpayers, just about $60 million in assets, sir, which, sir, if you were a betting man, you would love those odds for somebody to give you something, sir, which is 10 times worth 10 times more than what you were getting or giving. But that was the nature, sir, of the last administration. But we came to office, sir, and we resolved that we will bring what at that time, sir, was a sordid affair as it relates to Clico and the mismanagement, sir, of that entity, and to the extent that the last government, sir, would have sought in the first instance to protect those directors, sir, of that company. But we determined, sir, that we needed to solve this problem to the benefit of ordinary Barbadians, sir, those thousands of policyholders who were paying their premium, sir, as you would, sir, for any insurance product. And because of the mismanagement of that entity, found themselves about 10 years, sir, without any resolution with respect to their circumstances. And so we would have set about, sir, in 2019, the middle of 2019, a process which, one, was fair, sir, to the taxpayers of this country, but given that there was a commitment made by the previous administration, sir, we needed to ensure that there was some measure of fairness in terms of on the one hand, sir, the policyholders, but on the other hand, sir, with respect to the taxpayers of this country. So we set about a process, sir, through which we, having completed the debt restructuring, we determined that it could never make sense, sir, to pay 10 times what something is worth. And the truth is, sir, that was only the principal, because the interest that would have been paid on top of that, sir, was substantial. And so the piece of legislation before the House, sir, just brings to finality, if you like, the legislative framework that we would have undertaken, sir, to reissue the Series G bonds, sir, that were initially issued under the domestic debt restructuring, where we would have set about, sir, paying the policyholders through the issuance of a new set of bonds, which would have been liquidated, sir, over the course of 15 years. You would recall, sir, that immediately, that there, depending on the type of policy that you had, there was a cash payout initially, sir, up to $20,000. And then anything over $20,000, sir, would have been issued bonds, so that we can ensure that the proper management and execution of that, sir, was undertaken. Now, sir, when this process started, we had initially anticipated that it would have taken us, sir, no more than 3 months, for the most part, given that people have waited 10 years sir, had waited 10 years for a resolution. But you had the initial, and certainly, sir, it is coincidental that we're in this very building where the exercise was undertaken. And after the initial response from the public after having held the town hall meeting, sir, to explain the process of it, we are now here, sir, just a year later, to a point now we can report, certainly to this chamber and to the country, that resolution life, sir, resolution life, pretty much, sir, has ended. And July 31st, sir, would have represented the official closure, sir, with respect to resolution life, and handing over, sir, to the Financial Services Commission any outstanding matters that would have been related to the dissolution of that company. And, sir, I think it's important for us to appreciate that was up until the official handover, sir, that it was just about 78% of the policyholders, sir, who had actually, over the course of the last 12 months, properly engaged resolution life with respect to the winding up of the company, and to be able to set in train, sir, the execution of government's proposed solution. That the remainder of those persons, sir, for whatever reason that they did not respond to that, sir, they will now have, upon deciding that they want to engage the government solution, that they will have to go, sir, to the Financial Service Commission in order to be able to get the same treatment, sir, with respect to the solution that we put on the table based on the policy that you would have had with certainly resolution life, formerly PICO. Now, sir, let me just say that this has been a long journey with respect to the resolution of this matter with PICO, and this is just one part of that, sir. But it would be remiss of me, sir, not to respond to a few things that have happened in the interim, because I think it's important, sir. I recall, sir, in 2011 or so, sir, when I first read the Deloitte report about the shenanigans, sir, that took place between Thompson and Associates, sir, and Branley Consulting, and formerly Clico, sir, and the $10 million that was given from the Central Bank of Barbados, sir, and the distribution of those funds. I am a happy man today, sir, to have seen over the last few weeks a certain Leroy Paris, sir, going up the law courts in handcuffs, sir, in handcuffs. And was that process, sir?
Well, one has to be careful, sir, where you're...
And was that process is yet to be concluded,
Honourable member,
sir?
sir. Honourable member,
Yes.
one has to be very careful. Very
Agreed,
careful, sir.
Agreed, sir.
Honourable member, please sit. Honourable member, please sit. One has to be very careful in these hallowed chambers to comply with all the standing orders relative to the calling of people's names, especially as it relates relative to criminal proceedings. So I would discourage the honourable member and all other members not to call people's name, because you have absolute privilege in this hallowed chambers. One cannot respond to names being called. So one ought to be discouraged not to so do, honourable member.
Thank you very much, sir.
Plus, in addition to that, remember that the matter is still before this court, the honourable court, and no determination has been made relative to the guilt or innocence of the affected parties, sir. So never let it be said that any pressure is being brought to bear on any proceedings that are before a court in this land, sir. Continue, honourable member.
Thank you very much, sir. I was simply making the point, sir, that for the ordinary person in Barbados, sir, that the start of the process is important given what transpired, sir, with the complete mismanagement of this private entity. But certainly, sir, given what would have transpired based on the report from Deloitte, sir, that many persons across this country, sir, felt for a long time that justice was being denied. And therefore, the sight of it, sir, was an important element with respect to restoring the trust and faith in the systems that we have established, sir. And therefore, whilst the process is yet to be completed, I believe, sir, that the government, having taken the responsibility for dealing with the financial part of this solution, sir, that the judicial part, sir, I believe Barbadians will be watching with interest, sir, to see what would be the solution from that side. But I can't argue, sir, that I was not pleased seeing what I saw. And I believe, sir, that we have a responsibility in this very chamber and in the rest of the country to be able to bring to solution, sir, resolution, matters that have taken too long, sir, too long, sir. Because many Barbadians, sir, suffered, not just financially. Many Barbadians passed, sir, without any comfort with respect to these matters, sir. And, sir, it is most unfortunate. And therefore, as we seek to restore the trust and faith, sir, in the institutions of government, it is important that we hold people accountable, sir, and we do so in a timely manner. Now, sir, this bill, quite frankly, sir, is just to reassign the bonds that we would have initially issued in Series G bonds, sir, into Series I, given the new terms that we would have outlined in the resolution of this matter. And to validate that which we would have already done, sir, commencing last year, and to remind the public, sir, that at this particular point in time, all matters related to resolution life, for those persons who have not yet availed themselves, sir, of the structure that we have set in place with respect to its solution, will now be turned over, sir, to the Financial Services Commission. And actually, sir, today, the FSC actually takes responsibility from that officially for any administrative matters, any outstanding administrative matters relating to any life insurance or any other annuities, pensions, any other policy, any of the policies that would have been under the portfolio of resolutions like, sir. The Financial Services Commission will be responsible for executing that on behalf of policyholders. Now, sir, I just want to indicate to the Honourable, to the House, that certainly, sir, any future queries with respect, as was the case, persons who have been issued bonds, sir, naturally would have to make any inquiries to the Central Bank of Barbados. The FSC is the regulator, as you know, sir, with respect to the non-bank financial institutions in Barbados, and therefore assumes that responsibility. The truth is, sir, one of the hiccups, let me put it this way, sir, that certainly COVID would have impacted was that there was a part of the portfolio, sir, that extended to the Eastern Caribbean. And because of COVID and the whole mail system, sir, and the way that as you know, sir, some of the legal requirements, that would have impacted some of the resolution on part of the Eastern Caribbean part of the portfolio. And therefore, having wound up this particular part with respect to Res Life, it means that those persons in the Eastern Caribbean for whom any outstanding administrative matters will be required, that they too, sir, will have to engage the Financial Services Commission in order to be able to execute the final part of the solution. The reality is, sir, that this process was intended to be wrapped up in a matter of 3 months. It is now taken just about a year for us to arrive at this stage. And we believe, sir, that it is critically important now that we move forward so that persons can certainly regain some measure of hope, some measure of trust that the system, sir, of government will work, and it will do so in as timely a manner as possible. And this government, sir, remains committed to ensuring that we do the very best, sir, to ensure that when and if something goes wrong, that there's a clear process, sir, for how we will resolve these matters that certainly, sir, will redound to the benefit not just of the taxpayer, but certainly those persons who may be directly impacted with respect to the operations of any entity in Barbados. And so, sir, the amendments are, as I said, sir, pretty straightforward and simple, just to switch from one category of bonds, Series G, to Series B and I. Specifically, as at Clause 4, sir, the bonds that we issue shall not exceed the aggregate sum of $316 million, and as you would appreciate, sir, that is down significantly from the $600 million that was originally issued by the last administration. Certainly, sir, Clause 5 speaks to the charge on the consolidated fund, and Clause 6, sir, just speaks to the validation of the transfer that were given to the individual policyholders of the company as at the 30th day of September 2019. And so, sir, with those few words, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and the House resolve itself in committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Clause 1.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
Stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
Question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 3 stand part.
Question is that Clause 3 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 4 stand part.
Question is that Clause 4 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 5.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 5 stand part.
Question is that Clause 5 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 6.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 6 stand part.
Question is that Clause 5 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. It's Clause 6. I apologize. That all honorable members in favor of Clause 6 stand in part. Please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The schedule.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
Question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move this bill be read a third time.
Question is that the bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Resolution Life Assurance Company Limited Transfer of Bonds Act 2020.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Order number 7, sir. In the name of the Honourable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, to move the second reading of the Remediation Agreements Deferred Prosecutions Bill 2020.
Honorable member for St. Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are times when, as we approach perhaps even age-old problems, that we have to look to see what other options are available, what kinds of solutions are available to help us navigate increasingly difficult and complex waters. This bill, which is before this chamber, has its origins in our approach, sir, to dealing with corruption in Barbados. And in many respects, a lot of preliminary remarks have already been addressed in this chamber. We certainly canvassed a lot of areas dealing with corruption, both inside estimates and other debates. We talked about corruption when we dealt with the proceeds and instrumentalities of crime legislation in 2018. Before this chamber is currently a new Prevention of Corruption statute. The chamber has been made aware of the fact that a specialist team of investigators were engaged by the government of Barbados last year to come into Barbados and to begin to look forensically and analytically at the workings of a number of statutory corporations and in central government as well, to see to give us a preliminary indication of which areas would represent best cases, best situations to deal with the issue of corruption. There's that old Bajan saying, sir, lick and lock up down with. And that spoke to an era, sir, where the Barbadian black man would say, as Trevor Prescott would say, we're taking a stance and saying no more will you be allowed to beat me and lock me up. So while you might doubt the relevance of it, sir, in this context, I use it because as we have looked at the issue of corruption, we had to ask ourselves, in seeking punishment, is there an opportunity for remediation or even redemption? I'll draw the chamber's attention, sir, to the corruption case in Turks and Caicos, where the then premier was charged with several acts of corruption. In fact, not just the premier, several people. And there was a well-known hotel company, it's a West Indian chain, that was found to have engaged in corrupt acts with the leadership of that government at that time. The approach taken by the Turks and Caicos authorities was to levy a fine. I think the fine was $12 million US, sir, on that company as a punishment for the corrupt practices that they encouraged and got involved in, but also, sir, as a way of forcing that company to make recompense. There is a feeling, sir, and we've heard it expressed in Barbados, that if you find a company engaged in a corrupt practice, that you should engage in, I guess, what you could call commercial capital punishment. That is to say that the government of Barbados would cease to have any dealings with a particular enterprise. And that is attractive at face value. It certainly is. But as we turn this proverbial Rubik's Cube around and try to look at it from many angles, we had to ask ourselves, in the pursuit of punishing a particular entity, what is our ultimate goal? Is it to effectively cause the business to cease to operate? Or is it just to exact a punishment? Now you see, sir, one of the challenges of big business is that they employ large numbers of Barbadians, large numbers of anybody, and represent enterprises that keep the engines of the economy going. So in England, sir, my recollection is that the English authorities had to investigate Rolls-Royce. And they had to find a novel way of dealing with that particular entity. Barbados is not so different, sir. And we therefore had to ask ourselves, how will we approach commercial entities that may be found to have engaged in corrupt practices? And the method that we are proposing to follow is a method that is now well tried in Canada and well tried in England. And the results, sir, are not always perfect, but the scheme is this. Where an investigation establishes that a commercial entity has engaged in corrupt practices, the government is able to enter into what we are calling a remediation agreement. In other jurisdictions, it's called a deferred prosecution agreement. In fact, that's what it's called in England. In Canada, they use the term remediation. Perhaps, though, the term deferred prosecution agreement captures the essence of it in a way that remediation agreement doesn't. So the essence of this agreement as is practiced in England is that if there's evidence to demonstrate, to prove that you were guilty of a corrupt practice, the prosecution authorities are able to enter into an agreement with you, firstly, for full disclosure of all the details of the corrupt act. Who the players are or were, exactly what corrupt practice was followed, everything. You can't hold back anything. You have to give to the Crown, to the prosecuting authorities, full and frank disclosure. And then you subject yourself to a penalty. And that penalty is, among other things, or it can be, among other things, a financial penalty. So that, I mean, there are people who say, oh, so you're now allowed to pay your way out of a corrupt act. But what you're really compelling the company to do is to disgorge the benefit that they got from the corrupt practice, while at the same time, sir, allowing that commercial enterprise an opportunity to carry on doing business. one of the things about company law is that when a company engages in the corrupt practice, it may be difficult to find the exact individual. And then, as you know, because a body corporate is a human person, the question then becomes, who do you lock up? Which director will you send to jail? And is that necessarily the better option? As I said, in England, sir, and in Canada, the practice has now emerged and is well settled and recognized as a legitimate pursuit of justice, where the party enters into a deferred prosecution agreement or remediation agreement with the Crown. The terms and conditions are very strict. There must be strict compliance. You must disclose all of the corrupt practices. You must follow the terms of the agreement to the letter. And you must make reparation by way of a fiscal or other penalty. Now, it isn't everything, sir, that is going to be available for deferred prosecution agreements, sir. The nature of corrupt practices are vast, and it may be appropriate in some instances to do a prosecution. And in those circumstances, then the law will still be followed. This is not to replace anything that we have. This, however, is to give an option. This is to add to the potential remedies that are available. Part of our challenge, sir, is that people don't want to come forward. In the United States, people talk about a plea bargain. If I come forward and give evidence, will you lock me up? And the prosecutor will negotiate and say, well, if you give evidence, which may allow us to go after some other people, we will go easy on you. We see this on television all the time. See this on television all the time. There are instances here, and it's perhaps not the same thing, Mr. Speaker, but we have our own version of a plea bargain where you agree to plead guilty to a lesser charge, so as not to have to face a trial and be subject to a more onerous fine or punishment. But this is not, in other words, I'm trying to say this is not an unknown concept in law. This, sir, just gives the prosecutors an additional method of dealing with a difficult situation. Because in a company, you may not be able to identify the individual. Not with precision. You may, because a corporate structure can be so complex, you may simply not be able to identify which person it is you want to prosecute. But you may have clear evidence that this particular company made a payment to an individual in return for a particular accommodation or benefit. So if you don't, what do? Do you say, well, I don't know exactly who to charge, so don't go after them? No, sir. You go the deferred prosecution route. You disclose the act that was corrupt or otherwise illegal, and then the penalty, sir, is imposed on the entity. As I said, it is legitimate. It is one that has now come into its own both in England and Canada. But we've sought to follow the Canadian model, sir, because every wrongdoing by a company is not going to be a corrupt practice. There are companies, sir, that will pollute. For example, now if a company engages in an act of pollution and destroys a part of our environment, is it not an equitable solution to say to that company that you must remediate the damage that you have done, rather than looking for somebody to lock up and the damage remains there as a blot forever on our landscape and then becomes a burden to our taxpayers? As an administration, sir, We have seen dumping in gullies. We have seen illegal dumping in former quarries, dumping on the streets and so on. We see it. And in a way, what happened recently with the individuals who dumped the coconut shells in the back of the drill hall, that was remediation of sorts. And while for some people they may have found it to be offensive or not to have gone far enough, there's no doubt that to compel a person who has done a wrong, especially when it comes to an environmental wrong, there's no doubt, sir, that such an individual can be, and in many respects ought to be, required to clean up the harm that they have done. Now, yes, sir, that is a smaller situation, Mr. Speaker, but there are numerous examples in Barbados where, for example, trucks move waste from places like the port, and as soon as they get out of sight in a remote country area, they dump the entire thing. Who picks up that bill, sir? The taxpayers of Barbados. And that's how the Canadians have approached this area of law, because there's a large raft of wrongdoing which can attract a better outcome if there's an opportunity for the law to compel you to remediate. Now, Mr. Speaker, you know the criminal statutes of Barbados better than most. And you can tell the chamber if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that I am, because I don't think that we have in any of our environmental statutes, and we really do need to bring those into the modern era. But there's no opportunity for a court to order a particular wrongdoer to go and clean up 2 or 3 or 5 acres of land that he may have polluted. What often happens is that the Health Services Act, there was a case like that in Barbados probably within the last 12 months, an individual who was found guilty of dumping in a quarry. All that the Ministry of Health could do under the state of the law as it is now is to carry that person before the magistrate's court. I believe they pleaded guilty on about the second appearance. But that magistrate could not. That magistrate had no power to order that individual to remediate the premises. So what we have today, sir, before the chamber, is a bill which is intended to present more options to a prosecutor than simply bringing a criminal charge to result in a penalty. Now, the thing about remediation agreements, sir, when you have a criminal statute, as you well know, the maximum fine is set. Now, I point out to the chamber that in the case of Turks and Caicos, that particular chain, a hotel chain, was ordered to pay $12 million, sir. You know the interesting thing about it? That hotel chain didn't have any directors in Turks and Caicos. They had a corporate presence, yes, but they had no directors in Turks and Caicos. Not one. There was nobody in Turks and Caicos who you could go after, because all the directors lived all over the world. And you had to try and get them there to prosecute them in the first place. And in a situation where that person is not amenable to your local law, what will you do then? So, I defend this particular approach because I believe that it gives us many more options in terms of how we deal with the criminal element, because all crimes are going to be very different. So, sir, let me very quickly look at a few of the sections. And draw your attention to 4, which talks about the making of the remediation agreement itself. And at 4.1 it says, for the purposes of this act, a remediation agreement means an agreement between a prosecutor and an alleged offender. You know, sir, a person is only an offender after they have a conviction. And you know only too well, sir, that you tie up the court system for years, adjournment after adjournment, expert evidence after expert evidence, on and on and on and on and on, and hope to get a conviction. The beauty about the remediation agreement, sir, is you don't have to go through that process. You tackle it early. So a person who is an alleged offender, that's a person who's been investigated and who the prosecutor says, listen, these are allegations against you. This is the evidence that we have. Now, we could either try to go through a prosecution, or you come and sit down to the table here with us now. In the case of a corrupt practice, they would come, they would have to give all evidence, full and frank disclosure, and then they have to disgorge the benefit. So you're not limited now to a fine of $100,000 or $500,000. Under the agreement, you can say to the particular entity, you got to pay $2 million. That, or we go ahead with the prosecution. And there are not a lot of entities that will be willing to have their directors take a reputational hit, sir, in terms of facing a prosecution. The agreement, sir, must also be approved by the High Court. So we're putting protections in place to protect the integrity of the judicial system and the integrity of the legal system. So the prosecutor, once he negotiates the deferred prosecution agreement with the alleged offender, it has to go to the High Court for the High Court sanction. And the High Court is able to say, and is specifically able to say, I do not approve this. Or I'm prepared to approve it if you increase the penalty. Or I'm prepared to approve it if you add on further terms. But that is how we know, that is how the citizen knows that it has the protection of the judicial system, because whatever agreement is reached between the parties, it is only effective if it is approved by the High Court. Clause 4.4, sir, it says, in determining whether remediation agreement is likely to be in the interest of justice, the following factors are to be taken into account. And they're not many, but I'm not going to read them all. One that's important is the nature and gravity of the impact of the act and its impact on any victim, so that victims are also taken into account. The degree of involvement of senior officers of the alleged offender in the act. Now this, you see, sir, it isn't always the directors and the CEOs. It is also sometimes a lower level official who may engage in the particular wrongdoing or the particular practice. The CEOs may know, they may not know. But the point is, sir, that it is certainly worse if the higher you go in the totem pole, you are aware and that you are involved. The court will also take into account whether the alleged offender has taken any disciplinary action, including termination of employment. Did you get rid of the offending director or CEO? We take that into account. Did you make reparation? Have you identified or expressed a willingness to identify any person involved in the wrongdoing related to the act? Have you entered into a previous remediation agreement with Barbados or anywhere else? So that if you are a habitual person who comes to the court and says, well, I did wrong, but give me an agreement. I did wrong, give me an agreement. After a while, the court can say, no, we're not having any of this. A prosecutor may enter into a remediation agreement with an alleged offender at any time before the institution of criminal proceedings for an alleged offense. So once proceedings have started, this agreement has no place. So you can't then say, well, oh Lord, this trial hot. like he can get a conviction and then say to the prosecutor, well, I want an agreement. No, time for that is long past. So if you're under investigation, come to the table early, because once the prosecution starts, that is it. The effect of the remediation agreement, sir, once the remediation agreement is entered into between the prosecution and the alleged offender, and once it has been approved by the court, then you can't prosecute at that point. But, sir, I already realize that you have in your mind, well, what happens if they say they can pay and only pay half? Or what happens if they say they will remediate but don't do it properly or don't do it at all? Then, sir, any breaches of the agreement renders the agreement void, and therefore you are back to square one. Now, when we look at the content of the remediation agreement, sir, I want to make it clear that the person must not only disgorge all the facts, he mustn't only say what was done and who it was done with and who colluded, who in the private sector, who in the public sector was involved in this act. They must also undertake not to carry out any of those kinds of acts in the future. But I have to tell the chamber that part of the legal effect of the remediation agreement, sir, is that they're not made public. The public can know that a remediation agreement has been made, but not the content of the remediation agreement, sir. That is not going to be available to the public. The remediation agreement, sir, may include a requirement for an alleged offender, firstly, to pay a financial penalty to the court. And that penalty, as I said, is negotiated. Secondly, to compensate the victims of the alleged offense. So where there's a victim, sir, and again we come back to the inadequacy of our system. Our system, except in the case of a debt, our courts can order compensation. In a personal injury matter, for example, where there's a wounding, the judge or the magistrate has the ability to say, in addition to that, you have to pay so and so X dollars. So we have that. But that is in a specific case allowed by statute. Now, we're giving, in the case of remediation agreement, a broader brush, a better opportunity, because the victims can be of many kinds. A farmer whose farmlands are destroyed because of illegal dumping. In some instances, a gully, there's no particular victim, there's no named victim, but all of Barbados becomes the victim in that case. So, remediation agreement can require you to compensate victims. But it can also require you to donate money to a charity or other third party. And that too is an important added feature. It can require you to disgorge any profits from the alleged offense. It can also require you to implement compliance practices and programs within the structure of your business. And all these are things that are going to be monitored. You will also be required to cooperate in any investigation related to the alleged offense. And for those of you who have a focus on stamping out corruption, you have to cooperate with the authorities in terms of investigating the acts of corruption itself. And with any good agreement of this sort, sir, it can provide time limits for compliance. Now, Mr. Speaker, this bill has been on the order paper for quite some time, and I believe members have had the opportunity to look it over. I don't know that I'm going to spend any more time on it, but I will say, sir, that the way of dealing with wrongdoing has always changed over years. There was a time, Mr. Speaker, when petty criminals in Barbados could not have been ordered to do community service. It wasn't on our books. And we had an approach 30, 40 years ago which said, you commit an offense, go up Dodds. Well, Glenderry at the time. You commit an offense, you get a fine. But we began to recognize, sir, that what was happening was that people were being incarcerated when, in truth and in fact, it was incumbent on us to find other ways of dealing with the punishment. And we began to get a little creative, and you would know, Mr. Speaker, that we changed our legislation to allow different kinds of penalties to obtain. And that's how come young men and women now have an opportunity to go and do community service.
In the System Reform Act.
That's it, sir. You now have an opportunity to go and do community service and other forms of reparatory punishment rather than the old go and spend some time up the hill. Because we know that incarcerating someone has its own challenges. And sometimes you put out a better criminal than he was when he went in. So this, sir, is not to be taken in isolation. The Barbados government, in whatever form, whatever party, I believe it will be fair to say, has always recognized that we can't keep doing things the same way all the time. But the difference is that some people are not prepared to change. They recognize that you can't keep doing it the same way, but they're not prepared to step forward and to actually implement novel things. And I'm happy, sir, to be a part of an administration that's prepared to go the next step. This has not been an easy exercise for us because it calls us to challenge a lot of those fundamentals that we hold dear. Are we going by this statute to allow people to buy their way out of a criminal offense? And that's a legitimate question. Certainly, as I considered it, it was the first question I asked myself. But as I said, sir, you rationalize it by acknowledging, first of all, that justice has many forms. You recognize that it's not always a good thing to go through a trial because you can lose at the trial as well. You have to rely on the imperfect recollection of witnesses who will not stand up to a withering cross-examination by you and some of your colleagues. And you lose a case that you thought was airtight. And what do you get at the end of a conviction? A penalty that's fixed by a statute, but that may bear no relationship to what has to be done, because in a statute, in our penal statutes, is either imprisonment or fine. But we are prepared to go a little bit further, in fact, a lot further, by putting at the disposal of the judicial system in Barbados, not in the sense of judges, though they approve it, but in terms of how we manage the course of a trial. In this way, sir, we eliminate a costly and unpredictable outcome of a trial. We eliminate the delays that are so much a part and parcel of a trial of that kind. We provide for opportunities for the alleged offender to make good what he has done wrong. And that, sir, is perhaps the most important thing, the ability to force a man to put back what he took up, to put it back right, to remediate, to clean up the gully, to go and take out everything out the quarry. We can force you to do those things under this agreement. We can even force you to change the way in which you conduct your business in terms of your internal processes and checks and so on. So this, sir, for us in the region, I don't think there's any other country in the region that has it. So perhaps in that regard, we will be seen as a trailblazer, but that is no reason for us to pat ourselves on the back. What is a reason for us to pat ourselves on the back about, in part, is the fact that we are prepared at this point to say we have to find more creative ways. Can a person buy their way out of a conviction? Let's ask the question. What is of greater value to the society? what is. And I would venture, sir, that what is of greater value to the society is that the entity would be forced to disgorge any financial benefit, that they'd be forced to put what they've done wrong, they'd be forced to put that back right. The country as a whole would benefit from all of the various remedies, including the requirement that that person give up evidence of the other individuals who were involved in the wrongdoing, and therefore allow us to prosecute them too. And that's why I began by talking about corruption. Because this, sir, is a good tool to help us deal with that issue. You come forward, you enter into the agreement, and part of it requires you to give up evidence on the people that you engage in the corrupt practices with. No, sir, I think that all taken, that is a much better outcome for the system than to engage in a prosecution, the results of which are not guaranteed, the cost-benefit analysis of which is one that you fail. And more importantly, sir, all that the society gets out of that approach is a satisfaction of seeing an entity charged, but not, sir, not really benefiting from the judicial process. The one distinction that is important to make here is that individuals cannot enter into deferred prosecution agreements. So
Section
this is
6,
not.
1. 6. This is Section 6.
Yes, sir. Yes. So an individual is not entitled to enter into a remediation agreement. It is targeting bodies, corporate partnerships, or unincorporated associations. And the reason for that is I think, clear. And I averted to it when I talked earlier about sometimes the difficulty is capturing the exact person who engaged in the wrongdoing, who might have been the one to authorize the payment. Because in an unincorporated association, in a partnership to a lesser extent, but most of all in a body corporate, it is often difficult to find the exact individual. And sometimes the individual that you find who does the dirty deed might be somebody low down, and you can probably prosecute him, but the bigwigs who are the movers and shakers and the ones who get the real benefits, sir, those are the ones that you can't capture because of the nature of company law and the complexity of corporate structures. In a case that I'm sure we're all well aware of, a corrupt practice had its birth in Barbados. But the money wasn't paid out of Barbados. The money was paid on the basis of instructions given in a place like Bermuda, and the money was paid out of a bank account from a place like Bermuda into a place like New York. These things can get very complex. And who do you prosecute? The directors, the managers who were on the ground dealing with it? And if you prosecute them, what is the long-term benefit to Barbados? In a deferred prosecution agreement, sir, we could force the company now. So you don't just have to deal with the prosecution of a manager or somebody at that level. The company can be forced to engage in a whole set of reparatory arrangements with the government of Barbados. We could even say, go and pay that money to the Salvation Army. Go and pay 10 times that money to a charity, to the Cancer Society. So this gives us more opportunities, but I reiterate, sir, that it does not allow for participation by private individuals. Because with a private individual, you do a wrongdoing, you can't hide behind no corporate structure. You can't hide behind no hazy, unclear picture of who it is in this unincorporated body. You can't hide behind whether was it this partner or that partner. As an individual, you do wrongdoing, you pay the penalty, without doubt. But in this instance, sir, this opportunity is one that for clear, solid reasons is open only to bodies, corporate partnerships, or unincorporated associations. Now, Mr. Speaker, the experience in those territories who have taken this approach has been mixed. It has worked better with some companies than others. One of the challenges that has been highlighted has been the fact that with major companies that are very complex in nature, the difficulty has been with the investigations and so on. But the truth is, that's, as long as you're dealing with a major company, you can have that problem anyway. But this gives you an opportunity to sidestep the trial and to bring an earlier resolution of the matter through this legislation. I commend it to this chamber. It is novel, but we cannot be afraid to take new approaches to old problems. There are going to be some naysayers, I have no doubt. Some might even be in this chamber. But we, sir, are not seeing this as a substitute for anything that we have. This is not replacing anything that is there. This, sir, presents us with an opportunity to add. So I recommend this to this chamber because I see it as an enhancement. It allows us to impose a penalty. It allows us, sir, you know, there are instances where the companies allow the junior person to face the music. So the middle management person, the director, I know about that. Don't call my name. The company benefits, you know. The company gets the contract. The company benefits. But it's the middle management person who was foolish enough to engage in illegal conduct who will then face the penalty. Well, the company goes free, sir. So, as I said in Turks and Caicos, the company had to pay a fine of $12 million for its wrongdoing. It had to give up the land for its wrongdoing. So this, sir, when taken alongside what we already have, provides us, I think, with a better opportunity to address in a new way a situation or many different situations which would redound to the greater benefit of the society. I'm obliged to. Beg to move this bill be read a second time.
Honourable Member for Michael West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I assure you and the Honourable House, no intention on my part to either naysay or gainsay on this particular issue. What I will do is raise one or two considerations which I think carry some merit. Now, I have long believed that the whole concept of justice carries with it the notion of balance. There's an old prayer I used to hear my mother say in the dark and quiet of night. Lord, in your wrath, remember mercy. And that's the notion of balance, concept of justice. Justice does not see through eyes of prejudice, or should not see through eyes of prejudice nor partiality. And I say that for a particular reason, which I hope will become clearer as I go on to speak, and hopefully briefly. Perception now obtains in Barbados that when certain elements are involved in certain types of crime or corruption, that the eye of justice is influenced such that justice sees partiality terms of partiality or prejudice. In other words, that the interests of justice are not strictly served. The key, the critical element underpinning this particular piece of legislation is cited in the intention of the act, the intention of the bill. The bill would provide for a prosecutor in relation to certain offenses to enter into an agreement to defer prosecution of an alleged offender and impose certain obligations on the offender where such an agreement would be in the interest of justice. And that is a critical element, where such an agreement is in the interest of justice. Where, therefore, any of these agreements are arrived at between alleged or suspected offender and prosecutor, question will always have to be asked and properly answered. Will the interests of justice be properly served by this remediation agreement? Arrangements to enter into an agreement, to waiver such entered agreements, to terminate such agreements having been established, are all critical elements in this legislation. But when any of these actions are contemplated or effected, that question will always have to be properly put and honestly answered. Is the interest of justice being truly served? Mr. Speaker, the legislation may be very well intended. The implementation, the actualization of it may depart a far cry from the wholesome intentions. You know what life is like. We would not want to know, certainly I would not want to know, that this becomes a framework for any slap on the wrist for a friend's situation. The intention of the legislation may be wholesome, expressed forthrightly. The effecting of it, the actualizing of it, may in fact, we're dealing with human situations, find itself subject to the type of slap on the wrist of my friend's approach that is not intended, not anticipated by the Attorney General, and hopefully will not eventualize. That, I would want to know, is something that we would be careful to avoid. That we set up a situation that allows particular elements to escape the consequence of their wrongdoing by a slap on the wrist. It has been known to happen. Section 3 is very important in that regard. I don't even want to take the time to read all of it perhaps, but it talks of the objectives of this act: to encourage voluntary disclosure of wrongdoing, hold persons accountable for their wrongdoing, impose an obligation on persons who engage in wrongdoing to implement corrective measures and promote a culture of compliance, reduce the negative consequences of that wrongdoing on other persons who are innocent parties to the situation, and to provide reparation for harm done as a result of that wrongdoing. All very noble objectives, and they should never be used as a screen to apply a slap on the wrist to anybody who can be identified as a friend or an affiliate. I have to put that as a consideration in part in this discussion, because that's part of the reality of the life that we live. We have seen these things obtained elsewhere. I also believe, Mr. Speaker, the prosecutor is a critical player, and I see you nodding in the affirmative. The prosecutor is a critical player in the mix of things here. And in section 4, an abundance of authority given for the purposes of this act. A remediation agreement means an agreement between a prosecutor and an alleged offender in which the alleged offender agrees to comply with certain requirements imposed by the agreement. The prosecutor agrees that upon approval of the agreement by the High Court pursuant to Section 11, Section 5 shall apply in relation to the prosecution of the alleged offender for the alleged offense. And it goes on, Mr. Speaker, and it outlines the power of the prosecutor. And very briefly, I would simply want to say that we have to ensure that the prosecutor, the office of prosecutor, the position of prosecutor, that actor identified here as a prosecutor, is as insulated as possible, as far as possible, from undue influence coming from any source, be it private interest source, corporate interest sources, political players and actors. I believe if this legislation is to be implemented in a way that serves the interests of justice, we've got to go as far as possible to make sure that the prosecutor is insulated from any undue and unwanted, undesirable influence from any source whatsoever. I think that is absolutely critical. The other thing I think is very critical is the capacity of the court to quickly expedite these matters, because the court is involved in the establishment of the agreement, confirming that. The court is involved in adjustments or amendments, wavering of the agreement. The court is involved in termination of the agreement. The court is critically involved in this. We have already in Barbados a problem with the capacity of the justice system at the level of the court to expedite matters. And I think the attempt is being made here to expedite the dispensing of justice by, rather than have some cases embroiled in long drawn-out criminal proceedings, to come to a remediation agreement which is set in place in the context of clearly established parameters involving the expression and will of the court, the role of the prosecutor, properly insulated from that undue influence, and the willingness of an offender to admit to his offense and to be willing to identify others who were party to that offense and be willing to go the other steps in terms of ensuring that justice is properly dispensed in the interest of all parties. Those are 2 or 3 considerations I would want to put in the mix, and I hope that that does not constitute naysaying or gainsaying.
I remember for St. George.
Mr. Speaker, let me thank the Honourable Leader of the Opposition for his support for this bill. I welcome his comments, but I am able to give him the assurance, sir, that the prosecutor in this context will have the benefit, sir, of the independence that is required in order for him to be able to discharge his responsibility. Let me say, sir, that part of what is going to happen, and we've already discussed it with the Chamber during our estimates process, especially in relation to the area of corruption. A new agency is going to be established so that issues of corruption, past, present, if any, and future, if any, come, would be investigated by a specialist team of individuals, and to the extent that those individuals may constitute the prosecutors in that instance, they too, sir, will have the independent protection of the law. With those words, sir, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Beg to move, Madam Chair, that clause 1 stand par.
The question is that clause 1 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Madam Chair, I wish to propose an amendment to clause 2, and I need to offer an explanation to the chamber. In the definition section, Madam Chairman, prosecutor is defined as including, as meaning the Director of Public Prosecutions, a creature well known to law and well known to all of us. And then it goes on, or the Director General of the major organized crime, anti-corruption and anti-terrorism agency established by Section 4 of Major Organized Crime, Anti-Corruption and Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020, as the case may be. Mr. Speaker, Madam Chairman, you'd be aware that we are bringing a suite of legislation to deal with corruption and other matters. Unfortunately, the bill referred to here has not yet been laid and therefore has not yet passed this chamber. We've had to do some more work on it, and we are almost nearing completion, and we had hoped, Madam Chair, to have it here, but in view of the fact that it is not yet in this chamber, it is not a thing in essay, not a thing in existence, and therefore I want to amend this particular definition by saying simply prosecutor means the Director of Public Prosecutions. I serve notice to the chamber that when the specific legislation is enacted, we will by that enactment add on here the Director General of that agency, but I'd rather go through now and add to it by way of an amendment in the not too distant future. So I'm asking then that the words after Director of Public Prosecutions be struck from the bill.
Question is that clause 2 stand part with amendment. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, please say nay. Thanks, the ayes have it.
Clause 3 to...
Clauses 3 to 10.
Beg to move that clauses 3 to 10 stand par.
Question is that clauses 3 to 10 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 11 to 15.
Beg to move that clauses 11 to 15 stand par.
Question is that clauses 15 to 11 stand par. 11 to 15 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 16 to 20.
Beg to move that clauses 16 to 20 stand apart.
Question is that clauses 16 to 20 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 21 to 25.
Beg to move that clauses 21 to 25 stand apart.
Question is that clauses 21 to 25 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Schedule.
Beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
Question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honour the passing of one bill in committee with amendment.
Question is that I do not report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee with amendments. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill in committee with amendments.
Beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Question is that this bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited. The Remediation Agreements Deferred Prosecutions Act of 2020.
Question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. I do believe that this bill requires, as per Section 49 of the Constitution, a two-thirds majority.
Just checking to make sure we have everyone, sir. He's here. Yeah. Miss Bradshaw,
Aye.
Mr. Marshall, Miss Ford, Mr. Ford, Dr. Duguid, Mr. Sutherland,
Aye.
Mr. Rowe,
Aye.
Mr. Toppin, Mr. Hinkson, Mr. Thorne, Your Honor, Mr. Clark, Reverend Atherley,
Aye.
His husbands, Mr. Humphrey, Mr. Griffith, Mr. Weir, Mr. Abrams, Dr. Brown,
Aye.
Mr. King,
Aye.
Ms. Cattle, Mr. Straughn. Mr. Speaker, 21 honourable members voted in favour of the bill. Therefore, the threshold of support necessary to comply with Section 49 of the Constitution has been reached.
The bill has met the threshold as per the Constitution. This bill is passed and so cited.
Number 13, sir. In the name of the Honourable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, to move the passing of a resolution to extend the public health emergency under the Emergency Management Act, Chapter 160A.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to ask this chamber to agree to a further extension of the emergency proclamation. The history, as this chamber is well aware, is that the Governor General, acting on the advice of the Prime Minister, back in March, only the other day, but it seems so long ago, sir, declared a state of emergency for a period of 30 days, which would have ended in April, starting the 28th of March and ending in April. we came to this chamber, sir, in April and extended the period of the state of emergency until the 31st day of August. Now, sir, the 31st day of August has not yet arrived, and therefore this chamber may justifiably ask, well, why are we seeking an extension to it just shy of a month before its expiration? I believe that while not having moved it formally, the Prime Minister has made it clear that Parliament, after this week's sittings, will not resume until mid-September. And therefore, sir, this state of emergency proclamation will expire prior to the date at which Parliament will next sit after Friday. Now, sir, while it is possible always to cause Parliament to reconvene, we felt, sir, that it would be tidier to just deal with it before we rise. Now, sir, I don't think that it requires too much of us to justify the continuation of the state of emergency, but Hansard should be a record for future generations, and it would not serve us well if history looks back on this day and just saw a notation that this Parliament resolved to extend the state of emergency until the end of September. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I crave your indulgence. Just allow me to say a few things. Mr. Speaker, I don't think that it is lost on Barbadians that the pandemic with which we are presently confronted continues to have the potential to wreak havoc on Barbados. Fortuitously, the cases that we are encountering are, what I think, the exception of just one, cases that are imported. So, and we all know them, people who have come in on JetBlue, people who have come in on British Airways, people who have come in on Caribbean Airlines, people who have come in on Virgin, people who have come in on the chart of the Ghanaian nurses. People continue to present COVID positive cases. Now, we're doing our very best, and I think that it is the best that is worthy of highest commendation, to make sure that COVID does not propel Barbados to that place that we were in March, which saw us shutting down the country, imposing a 24-hour curfew, limiting the ability of Barbadians to move about, limiting the ability of Barbadians to play and to worship and to get together. But the fact is, sir, that even though we are not in that place, and even though we're managing the situation, in our view, in a way that is quite commendable, one little slip could completely transform that picture. In order to make sure, Mr. Speaker, that we reduce, if not eliminate, the possibility of those little slips, it is important for us to be able to continue to manage this COVID pandemic, this local COVID crisis, in a way that is swift and in a way that is reasonable. Mr. Speaker, I remind the Chamber that when we started, we had the highest level of restrictions that Barbadians were exposed to on the 28th. But through a process of almost daily consultation, we were able to free up sectors, and then directive after directive always saw Barbadians having an opportunity to spread their wings a little bit further. So now our current COVID directive looks very different to what obtained in the beginning. But it still requires management. It requires management, Mr. Speaker, because we have to have travel protocols in place. We have to have protocols in place for the hotel and tourism sector. We have to maintain protocols in place for the transportation sector, for the entertainment sector. I was dismayed to have received, well, let me be more precise. I was filled with a mixture of emotions when I got a call from the head of the COVID monitoring unit to say that he had closed 4 bars and pulled 2 bus crawls, we call them, 2 party buses off the road only on Saturday night. Now, sir, I was filled with 2 emotions because on the one hand, I was glad that he did it, because it's important to let people know that we are not joking around. But on the other hand, I'm sorry that he had to do it, because it told me that people have not been taking this crisis seriously. 2 bars side by side, or as we say in the country, side and side, in St. Lawrence Gap had to be closed. Now, that represented a lost opportunity for entertainment and letting off some steam for the patrons. It represented a lost opportunity for those businesses to earn revenue so as to be able to pay suppliers and pay salaries and pay taxes. So to have those businesses shut down is not good for anybody. But at the same time, sir, Barbadians and especially businesses have to be serious. Our current protocols say, Mr. Speaker, that the owner of the establishment is responsible for ensuring that Barbadians satisfy the protocols. And there's a reason why we put it on the owner. We could have said all Barbadians must wear masks when you go to nightclubs and must keep 3 feet away from it. We could have said that. But that's an impractical thing to police, because you could as well stand up at St. Lawrence Gap, at the Stars St. Lawrence Gap, and grab people as they come in. The owners of the enterprises, sir, from supermarkets to churches to nightclubs to restaurants, they have a responsibility in law to make sure that their patrons comply. But they've not been doing it. They have not been doing it, sir. I don't know if it is the pursuit of the almighty dollar, if they were so glad to have people in the place, I don't know what it is. But by not insisting that your patrons follow the rules, follow the protocols, you are exposing potentially large numbers of Barbadians to a further spread or to a re-emergence of COVID infections. Now, sir, there is no law that we have other than the COVID directives which would have allowed the COVID monitoring unit to act as they did. We have a health services communicable and notifiable diseases regulations that is dated. We had to make a quick amendment at the start of COVID, but it's a very different structure. We need, therefore, to maintain a legal framework which can allow those things to persist. We don't want to keep Barbadians in this way. I don't think Barbadians want to be kept in this way. But the fact is that until the world gets a vaccine or otherwise gets rid of COVID, if that is even remotely possible, we will have to be continually vigilant. Now, sir, under our emergency proclamation arrangements, and they're found in many places. We have an Emergency Proclamation Act, we have the Constitution, the Section 24, 25 of the Constitution, and we also have the Emergency Management Act. In all three of these pieces of legislation, a state of emergency is only allowable, can only be allowed to persist for 6 months. Or let me put it another way, the time for the proclamation can be extended to no more than 6 months. So the furthest that we are in law able to extend this particular state of emergency from the 28th of March is to the 27th of September. Now I serve notice on this chamber that it would be a fool's dream to believe that come the 28th of September this year that COVID will have gone away. The scientists and the doctors are saying that there may be a vaccine. Some are saying they're cautiously optimistic. Others are saying don't expect it. But the point is that we are in uncharted waters. And Barbados is already feeling the economic pinch. And we're also feeling the need to open back up as we have. I know that there are Barbadians who would like to see flights coming in every day, because it means that the family and friends can come and visit. People are delaying funerals in the expectation of individuals being allowed to fly into Barbados at some soon and convenient time. All of these are things that are happening around us that have affected the way in which we live and work and function and exist. But in the interest of the health and preservation of life and limb of Barbadians, it is important that we keep this state of emergency in place. The experience in Antigua has been interesting. Only last week, their Prime Minister had to go to their Parliament to extend his state of emergency by a further 3 months. And if you listen to the debate, it was quite contentious. And the opposition in Antigua argued that there was no basis for maintaining the state of emergency. And I was a little bit bewildered. I don't know what would be said today, but the one thing that has been able to help us in this fight has been our ability to change things sometimes on a daily basis as circumstances require it. Our system is such that it protects people because you have the full protection of the law, but equally, for the benefit of society, we've had to curtail privileges in a limited way. I won't bore this chamber with jurisprudence, but I will say that in the last 5 or so weeks, a case was decided in South Africa. And in that court, it was argued that a particular COVID directive had gone further than was necessary. And the court struck it down on the basis that even though you were taking steps to preserve life, limb, and to keep a society intact, those steps that you take must always bear some relationship to the peril that you face. And as we have walked through the various amendments to our protocols, that has been the one thing at the front of my mind and the front of all of our minds. Are the restrictions that we continue to impose, or are the new restrictions that we impose, reasonable and fit sensibly alongside the peril that we're trying to get rid of? The travel protocols, some feel that they're harsh, because under the newly issued protocol, as long as you come from a high-risk area, you have to be quarantined for a period of 7 days. It's mandatory. In my review meeting with the CMO this morning, Chief Medical Officer, he was careful to stress, it isn't that we have mandatory quarantine and then there is some lesser form of quarantine. We have quarantine, and quarantine by its very nature is mandatory. It's not voluntary quarantining. You're either in quarantine or you're not in quarantine. Now, we are about to sign into law a new set of directives. And every day, things are changing. There was a recent experience at the airport with a gentleman who came in only 2 days ago, tested negative, and was, of course, because he was coming in from a high-risk jurisdiction, he refused to leave the airport, and then he refused to go to a place of quarantine. He said he has a house in Barbados. He's going to his house. He's going to his house. He might be. He's going to his house. So the police had to be called in. First, to try to defuse the situation, and secondly, to try to get him to comply with our rules. I'm sure you're hearing stories every day about people who are supposed to be in quarantine and having friends over. And then there's people who are supposed to be in quarantine and you're hearing that they were at a karaoke someplace or another. They won't call me places. So, you know, even with all that we have done, we are still encountering new scenarios on a day-to-day basis. So our new directives are going to try to address those issues. So our new directives will say that when you are in quarantine, you can't leave. You can't leave to go and visit your godchild. You can't leave from the church. You can't go to your funeral. You can't go to a fete. You are in quarantine. When you get that next negative test is when you are allowed to go on your way. And under the regime as it exists, you can't leave and go to your house simply because we understand. I mean, who comes in the island and don't bring back something for somebody? And who, upon getting the call saying, you know, I got a bag of things there for you from New York, but you're going to wait 7 days before you can come and get it? I don't know what would be in the package. But that's not, we got to relate to Barbadians as they are. We know them because that is who we are. So you want to get your things. And you can't go and get your things unless you stop and you ask how Inez and how Patsy, and see if for long you get fat, and on and on and on. So we have now to tighten up those screws by providing you can't have visitors. You can't leave. This is not about inconveniencing people. This is about safeguarding the lives of Barbadians. Now, who would resist those efforts? I hope, as I know we all do, that over time, instead of a tightening, we'll find a way of relaxing. We've certainly tried wherever possible. We've tightened when we had to, and we've relaxed when we had to. But we understand because of the fact that some people who are testing negative at the outset may be negative then, but they may be positive in 5 to 7 days. No. We've determined that if you are from a high-risk area, and you know those places, the United States, for example, if you're from a high-risk area, we're going to treat you as a high-risk individual. Yep. We want you to come. We want you to come home. We want you to come to Barbados for the welcome stamp. You might have a business here, you might want to come and see if the sheep growing, whatever it is. We didn't close our borders. We just restricted your entry. And now we're saying, yes, Barbados is still open for business. But there's the proviso. And that proviso is that you must follow our protocols to safeguard the rest of the society. Whether you are a Bajan or whether you are a foreigner, as long as you are coming into our ports, you have to follow our protocols. Mr. Speaker, the overriding objective of the state of emergency and the proclamation that we are seeking to amend is those things that it supports. It supports the arrangements under the COVID order, and that's what empowers the chief medical officer to deal with the situation in this medical health pandemic as they arise. It also is the legal foundation for the directives, and as you know, we've been changing the directives from time to time. When we change the directives, Mr. Speaker, we don't come to Parliament to do it. Those powers devolve unto the Prime Minister by virtue of the COVID of the COVID order. And those powers are exercised by her upon consultation with and upon the advice of the CMO. The emergency committee, the EOC that was meeting throughout the process, they still meet on an almost daily basis to review, to reassess, to see if there are changes that need to be made. The COVID SAR is still on the job. The COVID monitoring unit, as you know, is still on the job. We can make this easy or we can make it hard. And we've seen situations where Barbadians are looking to make it hard, and we urge them to desist. Work with us, because we're doing it for your benefit. And one final comment, sir. There are mischief makers. I don't know what motivates them. I will confess that as a child, when you're home in the long vacation and telephones were still new, you would call somebody and ask for a name that you know in there. And body would hang up and you'd probably call back again in 5 minutes and ask for the name. You know, there was a time when that was the prank. I see a certain emphasis in Philip smiling. Those were the kinds of pranks that people did. And there's the old joke, sir, you will call somebody, is your water running? And the body say, hold on, I'm going to check. And when they come back and say yes, you say, run behind it. Those were the kinds of pranks that Barbadians got into, annoying as they were. But don't you wish for that world again? The latest phenomena on social media is that a famous cricketer went to Trinidad, having been in Barbados and gone to Sir Everton's funeral, and tested positive. All over social media. People in Trinidad getting disturbed, people in Barbados getting disturbed because they want to know if they went and got an autograph and was that body side of me, and I think he was saying, don't say this thing, you know, and on, throwing the entire society into a total state of panic and conveying the impression that that funeral, and perhaps any funeral, is a crucible for COVID. And fake news, but for somebody it is entertainment. We had a malicious piece of material on social media saying that the Ghanaian nurses had AIDS, they had malaria, they had hepatitis, they had stump toe, I mean, come on. That is not what it, so, and only yesterday, there was a social media video of the Prime Minister on a 4-day morning. In a 4-day morning jump up. To convey the impression that during this COVID crisis, our Prime Minister is out fetting and prancing up and so on. But it was last year, 4-day morning. Now, sir, these are not harmless pranks. They're causing pain, anguish, and most of all, panic in our society. And our ability, Mr. Speaker, to maintain order at this difficult time relies on people being confident in the news that they're receiving from the official channels. So I'm asking Barbadians, this thing is not over in a long shot. We are going to be at this fighting doggedly every single day for Lord knows how long. Please do not think that when you post these things that you cannot be found. I don't want to threaten people, but there are individuals who have posted threats on social media and they thought that they couldn't be found. Right now, they're being held in custody. But I don't want the members of the Royal Barbados Police Force to stop their hard policing to take the whole cybercrimes unit to be trying to track down the purveyors of malicious falsehoods. We are better than that. When you do these things, you are throwing Barbadians into a panic, you're harming people's reputations, and you're creating problems for our society. Please stop it. If somebody who was thinking of coming into Barbados from Lord knows where saw some of these malicious things, they can say, well, I ain't going there. That place chaotic. Look what's going on. How can I go there when a man going to a funeral and then testing positive for COVID? I prefer if you call my number and tell me the water running, or ask me if the water running, because I'll get a few extra steps of exercise, and I don't know. But there's a sense in which some Barbadians, some people, whether here or elsewhere, social media turns everybody into a celebrity. So some will go and mouth off, and others will use the anonymity and spread falsehoods. I'm begging, let us stop it. Let's be more reasonable, and let us be more responsible. People are being harmed by these falsehoods. And you cannot say to a country that you did it as a joke. If you want to crack a joke, call your friend, tell them something funny. These things are harmful. And I'm asking Barbadians to desist. I ask members to support this resolution. As I said, it extends until the 27th of September. And I don't presume to be the authority, but left to me as Attorney General, I would want to come back to this chamber in September and say, well, maybe it might not be required. But based on what we know, sir, we're going to have to be at this for a little while. I'm not going to prejudge anything, but the truth is the end of September is just 2 months away. And unless Harry Potter waves his wand and finds a vaccination, we can be at this for a long time. But over the next 2 months, work with us. Let us have a safer and more secure Barbados. I'm obliged to you. Beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we've come to the end of today's sitting. I beg to move that the sitting be adjourned until Friday, the 7th of August at 10 a.m.
The question that this honourable chamber be adjourned until the 7th day of August at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands adjourned on Friday, the 7th day of August at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.